Hey there, Heather, ho there. It's Jeff Cutter Diamond welcoming you to another Degrassi mini-series. I know I did plenty of mini-series about the Degrassi seasons, talking about the Ranker.com character lists. I also did Whatever It Takes, a 10-parter that I was supposed to have clips for and to explain things, but basically, I'm not allowed to have the clips on YouTube, so I'm like pissed off. And I just finished a 10-parter about the villainy of season 4, which I basically talked about the Rick Murray situation and characters that are basically you can call villains. So for this mini list, I have a 4-part series. All of them will be basically people's takes on the Rick Murray situation. Now, using these 4 people, I figured that I would try to get my point of view. So basically, the format is this: I'll talk about the person, and I would talk about, what they did in their videos and all that to talk about the Rick Murray situation and everything and how you could see it. And basically give you links in the description about the video playlist that I did that. Now, fair warning, one of the 4 actually only do like podcast stuff. So basically their podcast stuff will be linked. They haven't done a video on it. I don't know why. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this series. This is Cutters, Degrassi Takes. So part 1 is about a familiar face to Degrassi people. The first person who did Degrassi videos, topic videos, and this is it. It's NotAVampyre. NotAVampyre is a YouTuber who sometimes does streams of games that are not Degrassi related or anything. Basically doing their own stuff and all that. But basically, NotAVampyre for a couple of years decided to do Degrassi videos based on certain topics, like getting into the new class stuff, and then getting into like the later Degrassi seasons and all that. But for my money, what I like about NotAVampyre is the videos about the Rick Murray situation, seen in the playlist and of course in the description below. So basically, NotAVampyre took a look at some stuff mostly based on Rick Murray, and did the Deaf and Degrassi series about Rick Murray, and basically put 3 videos about the Rick Murray situation. Basically, part 1 was about the events leading up to Time Standstill. Part 2 was the aftermath with the students, and then part 3, well, they called it part 2B, was basically to do with the adults and all that. So anyway, I painstakingly went through the videos that they did and all that. Now, just to be clear, I call them they because the personal pronoun with NotAVampyre is they/them. So basically, although that there's a girl in the picture, like the pictures, basically that NotAVampyre goes by the pronoun they/them. So that's what I'm going to do. So anyway, Vamp's take is this. So basically, I'll talk about each person's take on the situation before I add my 2 cents. So anyway, this is what Vamp said. Vamp said that this whole Rick Murray situation changed Degrassi. It goes there. Rick put Terry in the hospital and disappeared. He came back to Degrassi trying to prove that he changed. Spitter and Paige self-loathed because they let Terry go after Rick. Alex has what is his abuser, always abuser philosophy, who had to deal with domestic abuse firsthand, and basically everyone was shocked she did that. Emma was basically friendless thanks to her pettiness towards Liberty probably dating Chris and all that. Emma didn't foresee the issues. Students were bullying Rick. Did he deserve it? Yes. And the students were mad at the school for not doing anything. No one was obligated to be his friend, but he was trying to rehab. And then Vamp said something about mob justice. Vamp also goes, Rick should have left Degrassi and was pushed to the limit, but still had some good episodes with the kissing bet with Toby and all that. See, the high schoolers can have something well done. Vamp also talked about the nice guy logic about Rick being happy that Emma was standing up for him. Rick retaliated because of his positivity. Jay and Spinner made Rick think things were cool, but then the prank stole his momentum. He had little support system and he was alone with his thoughts, which were violence. Vamp also said Paige diffused Rick and he apologized. Jay and Spinner ruined it due to Jimmy possibly ratting on them for what they did for the painted feathers. Spinner and Jay poisoned his mind, and Rick was ended up in a daze. Sean knew the consequences about revenge because he deafened Tyler and all that, and tries to talk Rick down, and he has good composure. How Toby felt and cried out. The gunshot, Rick died. Rest of Epps, Toby felt in a daze. Now, bear in mind, this is Vamp's take. Basically, I'll give my stuff on what Vamp says. Hazel ended up putting two and two together, seeing Jimmy's empty desk and all that. Thoughts on Radich. Vamp said his hands were tied and didn't take it seriously. Rick's call seriously. The deleted scene showed a lot of things. Radich should have seen the red flags coming and didn't really have warmth for his students and became jaded. He wasn't charged with anything. In hindsight, 2020. And then Vamp said the B plot was any plot would suffer with time standing still. And basically, it reminds you that mundane things happen in real life. There were a lot of issues with Dracula, Vamp said, about putting the play on, especially after what had happened. The characters in the aftermath and what happens now, Vamp said, basically didn't know much about Time Standing Still Part 2. It was basically a comedy of errors. Rick had a choice to come back to the school, and Jade Spinner set up Jimmy. And the effects were there. Massive aftermaths. JT and Liberty were friendly, and JT never saw Liberty's creative side. And basically, after 4 years of trying, JT finally realized that Liberty was a person, and they got together. That Toby wasn't certain how to feel about Rick. It was still his friend. JT attended the memorial for Toby's sake after Manny talked JT down. Sam said Craig's bipolar disorder might be a trigger, had been triggered possibly because, Craig just had to see Jimmy's laid out body and all that. Alex was messed up, beating herself up. She didn't want to make herself deserve better. Sean Coley wanted to admit things, but not much. And Vamp said Sean can't really be stoned, but he came back. He went to Wasaga to be with his parents and all that. And Vamp said how much the parents did well in caring for Sean and sending him to Toronto after what he did to Tyler. Ellie was alone. She tried to get people to stay with her, and with her alcoholic mom changing all that. She didn't try to blackmail Ellie and all that. She knew Ellie was a person, and Ellie went back to her mother. Jay had to face the consequences, basically losing Sean, Alex, Spinner, Emma, and he needed to get better. He helped Sean and Manny out in later seasons, and basically he got better. Spinner's arc was up front. He had to deal with it when Jimmy came back. No more guilt to Jimmy. And Vamp said, was Jimmy right by saying that Spinner was selfish by confessing his crime to Jimmy? There was a lot of betterment, and you have to learn from your trespasses. Vamp also said Jimmy's major flaw was holding a grudge. Did Spinner have to confess? And basically, Jimmy lost his identity, wanted to take risks, like go to a t-shirt shop or go for stem cell, but his father basically wasn't willing to help him out. And basically, Jimmy blew a gasket. Emma in season 4 was the turning point and changed / reset her character. There was a deep flaw in her. She could handle things herself, and she thought she could handle things herself. Old Emma was her perception, but she tried to sneak happiness for her problems. And Jay was a connection to Sean. Rick's family suffered dearly, and no sympathy. They could have done more. It was hard to say. Vamp also said about Raj says that the Dracula issue was huge. He was making a public face for a student, for 700 students, and basically a school that's on the 6 o'clock news for all the wrong reasons. He thought it was out of his hands, and it was a blow when it was released, and he had to think about his actions possibly. Snake blamed himself, saying we blew it, as in basically that the teachers blew it, and said that Why did we wait for this to happen before we saw the warning signs? So basically, that was just a run through of Vamps videos and all that, and basically the points that were of contention that I saw when I looked over it. And now it's time for my take. Well, basically, this is going to be more of a positive take on Vamp stuff, mostly because Vamp is unofficially my muse for doing Degrassi videos, because I did a few Degrassi videos in 2018 and all that, and then once she did, or they did, well, I keep thinking that Vamp is a she because of how the pictures are in the videos. But anyhow, Vamp is my muse, and when I did videos, I was doing them in a very negative way, and Degrassi Reddit let me know about it. So basically, I changed my tone. I just basically went through Vamp's Degrassi videos about the Rick Murray situation and realized maybe I'm doing this wrong. Maybe I'm just not paying attention to subtle things. So basically, I started rewatching the series again, and basically, it's like, oh my gosh, Vamp has gotten me to think about things and all that. When I get into, sharing the videos that mattered the most, in a sense, then yeah. But yeah, Vamp to me was always a positive, like in the Degrassi area. So anyway, here's what I take. So basically, I'm going to go through Vamp's takes and basically add my own take. So Vamp said first was, if James Degrassi it goes there. That I agree with. It definitely did because Degrassi tackles some big topics, not just in next gen, but in Degrassi Junior High and High. But they never handled a school shooting. Yes, they handled a shooting when Claude Tanner basically decided to off his life because things looked bad. And I believe he was just doing it to get at Caitlyn because, Caitlyn rejected him. So basically, I think he was just trying to get Caitlyn's attention. And it worked, kind of. But Joey basically said that, he's the creep and all that. Don't give him any fodder. So, yeah. And of course, when Vamp said about Rick putting Terry in the hospital and disappeared, trying to prove he changed. Well, yeah, lots of people sometimes do that. It is a common occurrence that people do stupid things and then try to prove to people they've changed. But a lot of people don't take the change. Reason being is because they just feel that there's some kind of weirdness to it. The fact of the matter is that things look a little bit awkward. And when Vamp talked about Spitter and Paige self-loathing because they let Terry go after Rick. I mean, how did they know that Rick was going to be abusive towards Terry? I know that they were trying to pry Rick and Terry apart, or at least try to see what Rick was like with Terry when they reconciled. But I mean, blaming each other is not going to help anything. Basically, it's just going to lead to a lot of trouble. And a lot of trouble happened. I mean, they hated each other. But in a sense, like, they both were mad at each other. And then they both realized that they couldn't blow their gasket at each other because that would be the worst possible thing. And I know that they didn't mean it or they didn't see it coming. Nobody did. And when Vamp said, Alex said, once abuser, always one, and dealt with domestic abuse firsthand. I mean, I did a video about Alex, a unpopular opinion video, and about how, Alex could have been much better portrayed, but basically all she saw in life was how her mother was being abused, and basically she was not too happy that, Rick was back at the school. Nobody was. I mean, like, honestly, who would be happy that he's back at the school? The only person I would probably think would be happy to see him back at school is Raditch.
And nobody mentioned this, but the fact of the matter is about Raditch is that, you know, in the deleted scene, Alex said something about GPA, and people were actually thinking that maybe it was something to do with GPA because, you know, the funding problems. And in the season 4 premiere, we saw a scene with Armstrong and Raditch. Armstrong wants money for stuff, and Raditch says, I can't do that because of the budget. It's not coming in. I don't have the allocated funds. And maybe it was an attempt by Raditch to try to get some financial backing because, you know, the school seems to always be in trouble and basically he seems to always not have the right answers. So basically, maybe he was trying to fix things by GPA. But anyway, Alex would have been perfect. Like, she was the student council vice president and she was good in a row, but basically she became a bully. Now, we had no idea about her home life. Emma had no idea. I mean, we give Emma a pass on that. But anyway, yeah. Basically, Alex had to deal with it. But basically, as Vamp said, that Alex just wanted to put a face to domestic violence and do to Rick what she should have done to her mother's ex-boyfriends. Although it's fair to say that later on, that her mother deals with an ex-boyfriend and basically uses money that Alex uses stripping to bail him out of jail. It's like the vicious cycle continues. Emma being friendless because of the pettiness and didn't foresee the issues and all that. That's true. I mean, Emma should never have been petty about Chris. It's like, why would she care about what people thought of her if with Chris and her breaking up? She should have just realized. She should have just realized that, you know, maybe it was for the best. Maybe, you know, Chris was scum the whole time and she didn't have to deal with him. And Chris was really portrayed as being a terrible person and all that. Emma didn't help matters either. I'm just saying. So, so yeah. And did Rick deserve it? Fam said, yeah. But the students were mad at the school for not doing anything. Obviously. I mean, when you look at things, it's like, oops, I went the wrong one. So it was hard to fathom because I mean, what can you do about it? And then basically, the no one was obligated to be his friend, and he was trying to rehab. I mean, you can make a play that, you know, it didn't mean much. It was just that, you know, he just wanted he just wanted to make people realize he's changed, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, why would you have any issue with it? So then you got yourself Vamp talking. The biggest thing Vamp was talking about was nice guy logic. And basically, what Vamp means is that basically that Rick was protected by Emma, and he thought that Emma had a thing for him, and that basically, you know, Emma was being brainwashed by Paige and her clique. Well, that's my take on this, but basically, yeah, the way Vamp said it, it's like it makes much sense that basically he wants a girl in his life and knows that Emma is protecting him, and that basically he needs to thank her and all that. It is creepy in the end, of course. And Vamp, like me, says that basically that Rick was doing quite well, but Spinner and Jay just had to steal his thunder and all that. I mean, I'm shocked that Spinner and Jay got to Rick as easy as they did, because I would think that no, you can't go out. No, Rick would probably see something happening, but no, I guess because in his state of mind, he's like, you know, Spinner and Jay are looking out for me somehow, even though that they're bullies. I don't know why. I mean, Rick should never have believed Spinner and Jay's BS, because, like, honestly, why would you? Also, you know, Fab made another massive take saying that, you know, Rick didn't have a support system and all that. And I totally agree with Famp's reasoning. It's like, how the hell did his parents not know anything? But again, it's safe to say that as well, you know, that basically he cries out for his parents. He knows that they both are at work. They both have other things to do. It's like, that's kind of weird. And the way he says it, mother and father, it's like kind of weird. A lot of people think it's weird. He's weird. Well, that's for saying something. And, you know, Fab said that he was alone with one thought, violence. Well, not necessarily. I mean, when he looks at the gun, it's like maybe he offs himself, and maybe he does what Claude tries to do and make people guilty. Anyway, Vamp also talked about how Sean, you know, when Sean was trying to calm Rick down, that he knew what happened, the consequences, because, you know, he deafened a kid and got sent to Toronto by his parents, although it was basically out of love. But yeah, I mean, Sean did the right thing, and as a police officer, you're supposed to try to diffuse the situation by calmly talking to people. Well, of course, there are some police officers, Shetland, who don't do that type of stuff. So, yeah. Sorry for being a little political, but sometimes it just doesn't make sense. They have also talked about about Toby's being in a daze and all that. I mean, the writers didn't really give Toby much room for stuff. Back in Black, he was a B plot guy, and then basically it was just nothing else after that. It was like, what the hell? Vamp's take on Raditch is basically his hands were tied, it didn't take it seriously, there was a lot of deleted scene problems. About the Monday detention. I mean, about talking to Spinner at 3:30. And that the red flag, and that he was basically jaded. In a sense, I agree with Vamp. That basically Raditch was there for the long haul, and basically throughout his run, like seasons 1 through 4, like basically every season he starts to get a little bit more unbearable, if you will. I think it got to the point that basically the students were basically not happy with him. And, you know, Raj had a lot of issues with himself and with the school. I'll get more to it in my video, but anyhow. And the biggest thing about Vamp is talking about the B plot. Because, you know, it was a good B plot, but as Vamp says, it suffers when time stands still. And it actually does cause you to think it's because they're like, wait a minute, mundane things happen during normal times. That's right. I mean, things happen and all that. And, you know, the whole thing with Cindy and Joy's house and basically everything topsy-turvy. It happened. And, you know, it was a good plot all by itself. And it led into Time Stands Still. Excuse me. Excuse me, sorry. So, anyway. Vamp even looked at the aftermath of each character. Something I attempted to do. Well, in my video about Degrassi character aftermaths, it was basically from 2019. So, a couple years later, there's going to be a lot of changes and all that. I feel like there's going to be. But basically, said that JT and Liberty somehow found each other because of this, because of the Dracula situation. And it was like one of the weirdest things that happened was that, you know, from the shadows of these issues became a relationship. And also, Vamp was talking about, and I agree, that, it was just lucky. And when Vamp said about Toby didn't know how to feel about Rick and all that, yeah, he was just basically in this issue. The issue at hand was how should you feel about Rick and all that? I mean, you feel sympathy towards Rick that he was being bullied, but I mean, he's a monster and all that. That's what I think. He's a monster. The one take that Vamp did that I basically was questioning myself about is about Craig and the fact of us being bipolar after a few episodes of the Rick Murray situation, but basically that this might have been a trigger. Now, believe me when I say this, I honestly tried to figure it out. I'm like, is Vamp right in a sense? I mean, honestly, I say possibly, but I also say that doesn't make all the sense in the world. Nothing makes sense. I like the fact that maybe it was a trigger, but it wasn't all that triggered him. I mean, it was just basically things that snowballed, especially with Ashley. I mean, Craig was basically a serial cheater and all that. I'm sorry, but that's the way I feel and all that. And when Fam said Alex beat herself up and didn't better herself, probably because of this whole thing, I honestly thought that maybe Fam had a point. I mean, after all, Alex didn't really show much in the way of improving herself, which was weird. It's like, I know Alex is kicking herself for what she did and all that, but I mean, seriously, I think she deserved better. And the fact is, she got lucky that she in her own mind was lucky that Spinner and Jay basically took the fault themselves instead of blaming her and all that. You knew that she was lucky that Jay and Spinner both decided to just take the fault themselves. Although Jay, I think, probably was not too happy that Spinner basically caused trouble. I mean, whatever. So anyway, yeah, and Vamp said about Ellie and how basically she was messed up after Sean left to go to Wasaga. And basically that, Ellie was desperate to have people around. She was alone in the apartment that she and Sean shared. So it's like, well, yeah, of course she would be upset being in that apartment by herself when Sean abandoned her, quote unquote, abandoned her. And that, Ellie had relationship issues. Had she almost killed herself on purpose after Craig rejected her. That was in Degrassi Goes Hollywood. Or no, sorry. I think it's Degrassi Goes Manhattan, but it's the B plot. I don't know. I freaking can't remember everything. So, yeah, that's how it goes. I mean, also talks about the fact that, Sean and why he went back to Wasaga. And I agree that, Sean felt guilt over what happened with Rick. And basically, he's like, I may have killed Rick. And he's like angry at himself because why did he do that? I mean, he was protecting Emma, even though that a lot of us were shocked about it because, he and Emma didn't really have much chemistry after Sean left Emma for the Candy Bandits of Coles. Also, she talks positively about Jay and the fact that he finally had to deal with the consequences of his actions, especially with the fact that he kind of lost Spinner. Spinner decides not to be the Spinner of old and basically wants to better himself, and that Jay basically lost Spinner, and then he learned he had to be better. He told himself he had to be better because, you know, he wants his friends back. Oh, that. I honestly think that that was a good take by Famp. Is that, yeah, it is possible that, you know, things happen and all that. And I like it. That, you know, in a sense, like, you know, saying that Jay lost everybody and had to regain everyone's trust. I would probably think that he made a concentrated effort. Although, obviously, I'm not really on the Jay bandwagon. Talks about Jimmy and how the fact that Jimmy was struggling to identify himself. True. Of course, it's like, what are you going to do about that? So, that makes sense. They also talk about the fact that Jimmy's major flaw was basically not holding a grudge against people. Some people they just think that they're the better guy and all that. You have to be a calm influence and all that. I wouldn't put anything past anyone about the fact that maybe things are better and all that. I mean, when you look at things, it's that, you know, Jimmy was better for everything. I don't think it was a flaw, and said that basically he figured that Spinner was selfish for telling the truth. Spinner was not selfish for telling the truth. Spinner really was hurt by the way he hurt Jimmy, and he was trying to make amends. I mean, like, a lesser man would not have even come clean and all that. And of course, Famp's point about Emma, you know, makes a little bit of sense. But, you know, says that basically Emma had her deep flaw and that she tries to handle things herself, and old Emma was her perception and tried to seek happiness. That's the one thing, is that basically when you look at Emma's character development, it's that, you know, you see Emma and you see her struggling, and like no one's helping her out. No one's gently telling her, Emma, you need to go see therapy and all that. Snake, I know, they should have pushed her more. I mean, I think in a sense she blamed herself for what happened and all that. I know Fam didn't get to that part, but I basically think that, you know, she was harsh on herself because of what happened. I mean, maybe she was upset that she protected Rick. I don't know. But I mean, it wasn't all her fault. I mean, the students did push things to the limit, and Emma basically got a bit blunted by it. Famp in the end basically said that, you know, the show was about the kids and that the adults don't really get much of storylines and all that. But basically, Famp does talk about how Rick's parents basically ended up having to deal with their situation. They probably had to leave Toronto because of what Rick did, and basically how they were perceived and all that. Especially with the fact that, you know, their son's a school shooter now. And Fant makes the theory that they left Toronto, probably the province, to deal with the situation. I think so too. But I also think that maybe the Murrays got in trouble for unlawful, not really unlawful use of a gun, but basically unlawful storage of a firearm, pardon. I mean, that is just as bad as anything else. And I think they got into trouble. And I think that Rick's dad probably had to pay a price for it, some kind of price. So yeah. And of course, Vamp talked about Raj and how, he might have had guilt over what he didn't do to Rick and didn't help Rick out. And also the guilt about, Dracula. I mean, Vamp goes on and said that it was hard to, be without that. So, how can you fix it? I mean, it's hard to believe in all that. But basically, the most important part about the whole situation is this. With Vamp did an in-depth look at how shootings happen and all that. Vamp even admits that they actually looked at some school shootings and all that, and about serial killers and all that. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that if you do like a presentation, but basically Vamp did it being a little obsessive. People get obsessed with things. I mean, that doesn't take away from their character. So when you look at it, it's like Vamp is basically, I put a positive spin on Vamp stuff because, I mean, Vamp did a good job trying to explain things. And I think Vamp deserves a lot more credit than is warranted. I mean, trying to calm down the situation, trying to see everything. There's a good reason why Vamp is my muse. And will always be. So anyway, that's part 1. There are 3 more parts coming up. Don't forget to watch them. I'm Jeff Diamond. See ya.